All right, I'm delighted to be joined by the Republic of Ireland manager, Stephen Kenny. How are you keeping?
Yeah, very well, Nathan.
It's been a few months since you've been out and about. I presume as Ireland manager you don't get official holidays and you haven't just had the feet up for the last 3 months.
No, listen, it's been an interesting period. You get an opportunity to get to the World Cup to see vital games and to see the players playing in England recently. So it's been and to prepare, of course, for the forthcoming campaign.
You got a good insight into both France and the Netherlands at the World Cup, maybe at times a somewhat frightening insight into just how good they can be. What are your main, as much as you can tell us, what are your main takeaways from the World Cup?
Yeah, I wouldn't see it as a frightening experience. Like I definitely, I knew going out from Holland's perspective that there's only so much I could learn. I knew they were changing coach. Ronald Koeman's coming in a different system, even different way of playing than Louis van Gaal, but it was good to see the characteristics of the players live, and some of the players that we know, obviously the higher profile players, but some other players have emerged, and it was good to see the characteristics, see them live and see what how they look live, and that was important. I think with France it was fascinating really because, say the Tunisia game for example, they made so many changes in the game that they lost to change the whole team, but it was really important because we all know the characteristics of all the best players, but the players that are emerging, I got to see all of those live, and maybe not at their best in that game, but and I think that's important with the nature of the Dutch game. France playing Holland three days before they play us, so there is a possibility he could make changes, and we have to consider that and have to plan for it. From my point of view, seeing Denmark against France was a brilliant game to see, really brilliant. If I could have picked a team to play France and to see, if you give me all the teams in the World Cup to pick, I would have picked Denmark.
Right. You see them as close tactically to what you're trying to do?
Not necessarily, but tactically the most interesting and most relevant to us, and so that was fascinating. It was a great game, and so good to see it. And obviously France are World Cup holders 2018 in the World Cup final, nearly double World Cup holders, lost on penalty shootout, one of the top two teams in the world, but obviously our second season in our group, remarkably. So that's the nature of it.
I asked because when you were in studio with us a couple of years ago, obviously you were very open and honest on your health issues that time in Sweden, but you spoke brilliantly actually for the first 10 minutes about just being at the Euros and watching Portugal, and you spoke that day about Bernardo Silva's positioning and the way that the way the wingers played on that team, and then actually I think watching Ireland, it seemed a lot of what you had seen had sort of fed into Ireland's tactical plan. When you look at France, like the thing that people really remarked upon in those opening games was Griezmann, who'd sort of become the forgotten man of French football, and his role almost as a more deep lying attacker, almost another midfielder. Was that something you were expecting going into the tournament?
Yeah, I think you must consider the games before that, which are the Nations League game. France didn't have a great Nations League campaign. Maybe it wasn't their highest priority with the World Cup, but they were experimenting. How do we get Benzema, Mbappe and Griezmann into the same team? So they were playing with three at the back, and they played Griezmann behind the front two. And you think he could adapt easily from, he's been a second striker in the previous World Cup. They played an imbalanced team in the previous World Cup where they played Mbappe wide on the right in 2018. Griezmann's the second striker to Giroud, and they played a narrow three in midfield then. In Tweedy was narrow on the left to complement Kante and Pogba then, but they didn't get good results with that system with the three at the back. So traditionally, obviously, Didier Deschamps has been played with a back four at Monaco and certainly with France, and they've been hugely successful. So the evolution of that sort of fluid system with Griezmann in an eight, as an orthodox midfield player, really playing as the most advanced of the three in midfield, but nevertheless, those would not have been characteristics people would have seen from before, been an out-and-out striker really, and like one that cost 100 million, you know, because that's
was
how
his job,
that's how highly he was regarded, and he was terrific for Atletico Madrid in those early years, and went to Barca then. But he had the tempo France play at. They do rely on individual brilliance, and he provided it.
That bit of Deschamps thinking slightly differently then with the Griezmann and giving France something different. Like, you don't get to the top of the game, the top of coaching the way you have without constantly learning and looking around for new styles, new techniques. When you're looking around now, when you're going to a World Cup, when you're going to matches, are there coaches that you're looking at who you feel really are at the forefront of things that maybe we don't know about, that maybe we're not focusing on, where it's, you know, we look at Guardiola and Klopp all day long? Are there other names that you would look around Europe, look around the world and admire?
It's not so much names as such. I admire teams really to watch, and I do think that there had been a lot of, just in my opinion, a lot of people said, well, you know, we must learn from Morocco. They have a way of playing, and Morocco are outstanding in the World Cup. There's no doubt. We must learn from them, and they must be a blueprint for us in how we play. And it's a point of view, you know, with respect. But I think Morocco are a country of 170 million. Obviously, they've had the diaspora really of all of those players from France and Spain, you know, and other countries, and they played a certain way to get to the under a different coach to get to the World Cup, and obviously played in a very counter-attacking style with some terrific players. But I don't think they're necessarily it's relevant to us. I don't see the relevance with the characteristics of the players they've got to what we've got. I don't see that. But I think we can learn from the country. I think we can learn most from is Croatia. A country, 4 million people, World Cup final, World Cup semi-final. But okay, they've got some world-class players, particularly Modric, who's playing with Real Madrid. We don't have players playing at that level, but it's their intention to dominate possession. They never have an inferiority complex, and it's their intention, no matter who they're playing, to get a foothold in possession. They are never thinking about how can we sit and hopefully break and get something. They are thinking, they played Brazil and they're looking to dominate possession. Okay? Now, it doesn't always work because Brazil are so good, they force you back.
Sure.
All right? But for us, and I experienced this myself in the Champions League and in the Europa League over the years, that in order, and this was a sea change really in how Irish teams, I felt, set up in Europe, and we must, and we have now over the last 2 years, I feel, improved. We mustn't think that we have to sit back and counter all the time, regardless who we're playing. Like, there's an assumption, for example, that when we play France, that they're vastly superior to us, and which obviously are. They got 2 World Cup finals, that they will dominate against us, you know, possession and that. But I think Croatia, one legitimate way of winning those games sometimes, and I think it's important to pass with penetration. You know, in my early time as manager, we were retaining possession without penetrating, and you don't want that. Then we've improved, and since we've gone with 3 at the back, played 20. Some of the stat kept saying we played 22 games, we scored 33 goals. So scoring goals hasn't been an issue for us. Okay, and I think we're more fluid now, and we have the ability to do that. And all those players have scored their first goals for Ireland. Okay, but I do think that Croatia sometimes, when Croatia would play Brazil, who were superior to them, because Croatia were not the team of 4 years ago, for example. I didn't think, but yet they beat Brazil. They created it. They without creating chance. So they dominated possession sometimes without penetration, and sometimes I found that myself in some of the European victories. It's a way of winning in dominating possession. You're not necessarily penetrating in any major way, but you're staying in the game for long periods through keeping possession. And we that's something that we must be confident in our ability to retain possession and to pass the ball the way we can. And we've got cutting edge players who can score goals.
Well, that's when you look at Croatia and you look at Modric. Like, it's a bravery that Modric has to get on the ball.
It's not Modric. Like, just
you feel
just
Croatia when Modric steps away, they'll continue to play like that.
Well, I think he's obviously their best player, but I think it's a mindset, and you know, and I think they've got players playing overall a higher standard than we have. But I think it's, you know, Dynamo for Ireland as a nation, we need Dynamo Zagreb, we need Shamrock Rovers or Cork City or Derry City to be our Dynamo Zagreb. You know what I mean? And our Hajduk Split, particularly Zagreb, who produce all these players. And obviously with the academy system now evolving, and we're still, you know, it is in its infancy really in Ireland. But we need to produce players ourselves in the way that they have, you know. And then obviously they'll move on to the bigger leagues when they get the opportunity. And I think Croatia are a really good model for us. Obviously, they don't have GAA or rugby in such a strong, in such a country of our size that we have, and you know. But I think we can learn a lot from them about their club model, but also their mindset as well. You know, that they trust the technical level of the players, and all our players, all our defenders now that have come through. Like we've 18 players have come through our own system in the last 2 years. 18 players, Nathan, like that's unprecedented, and they've all come through our own system, and they're all good in the ball, and they're all technically decent. Okay, so I think that's.
Did you see that bravery when you first came in? Because I remember talking to John Giles about one of the early games, even maybe just past the COVID era, and we're talking about possession football. He was making that point of there's possession for possession's sake, but there's another level to it then actually, that you're doing something when you're on the ball. Do you think there was a confusion as to, even amongst the players, as to what people expected from your style of football, that people thought it'd be 65-70% just keeping hold of it for the sake of keeping hold of it?
Yeah, no, that's not the way you want to play in the vast majority of your games. Like, I think you need to have penetration in your play. Like, there's no doubt about it, and that's what we found in our early days. We were playing without penetration to get the players.
Why was that, do you think?
Well, we just want midfield players looking forward and passing quickly, and you know, we want people watched the early playing from the back of the early days through their hands. They were nervous of it and felt we were unsure doing it, but I never had any doubts that we've not conceded any goals from playing out, and you know, we've obviously created a lot of chances with the goals, as we've said, but you know, from a sports science point of view, we brought Impact in, the German company, to measure our forward pass and just to validate, and measure, you know, every player's forward passing and their range of passing, and you know, we did that just to verify what we see with our own eyes.
And when you present that to the players, are the players initially, would they have been surprised by the lack of forward passing? Would they have thought that there was more penetration than there actually was?
Just through video clips, I think players see it, and we, you know, clip stuff, and Keith Andrews and Stephen Rice as well, and you know, Dean Kiley. We're clipping stuff all the time and just showing the players the better ways we can do things.
Is that an inbuilt lack of confidence amongst Irish players that they don't feel that? Is it a technical thing?
I don't think it is. No, I think it was just. I don't think we have that now. I think we although we did show for the first time, we went back that way a little bit in the first half against Norway in the last window, where we didn't play forward quickly enough, and in the second half we addressed that and created a lot more chances against a really good out of possession team. Like Norway are good players, and obviously like a lot of these countries are producing, like Norway are producing Odegaard and Haaland, and Sweden are producing Kuzelewski and
Isaac,
yeah, you know, and Chikara. So a lot of good players. But I think from our point of view, the characteristics of our forwards 2 years ago when I took over, Nathan, when you looked at when David McGoldrick retired, then the characteristics are much different now, completely different. All of a sudden we've got Adam Ida back fit and back run very, very quick centre forward, leads the line. We've got Michael Obafemi, we've got Chidozie Ogbenya, we've got Evan Ferguson, who's come onto the frame. We've got Troy Parry and Aaron Connolly, who's injured at the moment. But as well as the other players that we have, like Callum Robinson, who's injured as well, Will Keane and so forth. But the all of those players have different characteristics than what we had before. Different characteristics, and that enables us to play differently.
Did you ever speak to David McGoldrick over the course of the past season about the potential of him coming back?
No,
he's obviously in the form of his life.
Listen, David's a tremendous individual. What a warm person, really brilliant person. But he had his reasons, and he disclosed them to me, and I understand him. We have to respect him, and you know, he's prolonged his career now, and we wish him well.
So just on the development of players, a couple of things. So Roy Barrett, when he announced he was leaving, gave a really interesting interview on funding and the lack of government funding for football since the turn of the century, and it working out about €100,000 per soccer club, twice that for GAA, 3 times that per rugby club. And also there's been a conversation over the past couple of weeks about academy staff, and Luton Town having as many academy staff as there is in the entire Irish professional system. The setup Vinnie Perth was on talking about, been over at Fleetwood, the incredible setup that they have there. How far along are we? Like, there's a danger always of patting ourselves on the back that Gavin Bazunu progresses and that there'll always be outliers, players will always come through. But when you're going around the world and you're looking at Croatia, or you've been in Portugal this week looking at Mikey Johnson, you're seeing teams, you're seeing their setups. Like, where are we in the European order in terms of football and developing players?
Yeah, well, I think
there's a lot in that.
Yeah, that's a big question, and in many ways, considering the resources, we're punching above our weight in some respects, and obviously that's been reflected in the under 17 and 19s, in their rankings, both in the top 10 in Europe. But and that's credit to the coaches involved, and I think but it needs uniformity, of course, and it needs no gaps in the system. There's a lot of gaps in the system due to money, really. You know, they can't have teams only play every 2 years. It's recently changed under 14, 15, no under 16s, and under 17, no under 18s, and then 19, and then you're finished. If you're not ready for the first team and you're under 19 and the season's over,
you're done with the game. And
not only that, you're lost. You're completely lost, because it's just a drop off. Hardly anyone comes back. It's not an ideal system, and infrastructurally, facilities, all the rest. You've had numerous debates on this. I don't need to add any more. I think people know the facilities are miles behind what you'd need, and the clubs are underfunded, and the stadiums are completely underfunded, and training facilities are underfunded. So we know that, and we mustn't accept that as we must fight. I think Roy Barrett was making that point, and I'm sure Jonathan Hill, the FAI CEO, will be determined to try and address that. And I know he has a plan going forward that he's working towards.
Mikey Johnson was in the papers today, so you've been over to Portugal to see as he.
How did anyone know that? That was I went in discreetly.
Did you? You're not that discreet.
I went in
front seat of the Ryanair flight over.
I went. Is that right? I went in moustache and glasses. No, I think I went to see. Now that you've mentioned it, Vitória Guimarães versus Braga on Monday night. But it's funny. It's Portuguese football. That's what we focus on in Ireland. But I remember the UEFA Cup final being in Dublin, and Porto played Braga in the final. I don't remember that. You might have covered it.
Yeah, Falcao scored the winner.
Yeah, and last year Braga got to the semi-final of the Europa League, and they're not one of the big clubs. So you've got obviously Lisbon, Benfica, and Sporting Lisbon, Benfica, and Porto are the big three, aren't they? And then, so so
he's in.
Yeah, well, I would have hoped by now, but it's not been confirmed by UEFA. So we're still waiting to have that confirmed. But yeah, he's committed to Ireland, and we're delighted to have him. And he's someone that played in 4 Scottish Cup finals before he was 22. And for Celtic, it's very hard to make the breakthrough at Celtic. You have to be good to play in their first team. And so he came through the academy and played, and he just spent a year out injured, which is difficult for him, calf operations, and difficult. So in the interim year, Celtic signed a lot of good players, a lot of Japanese players, and a lot of players in different parts of the world, and had a great season. So he found himself on loan in Portugal, just after coming back from injury late in the day, and finding his feet again and trying to find his rhythm. So I think he'll be a good addition to Ireland over the next few years.
How much time, how much work do you put into those type of players, Irish eligible players? I know, back home in Ballyhonus, John Joe Finn had the very strong connection back in Ballyhonus with his granddad, and work was put in there, and we'll see how he develops at Getafe over the next few years. Chidozie Ogbene did a brilliant piece with us with his parents, talking about his heritage and growing up in Nigeria. And being honest, it wasn't a straightforward decision for him. As much as we want every player to come sing an Arrow on the Veen, it's not always the case. How much of it, when you're looking and talking to them players, is convincing them, and how much do you need to be convinced that they want to come?
Yeah, I don't think you can generalise lately. Every I think ultimately the profile of the squad at the moment is Irish-born players. 95% of the players are nearly Irish-born, over 90%. So it's players that have come through our own system. But like anything else, Nathan, if you were to go get that big money move to BBC to work yourself in England, and your son or daughter wanted to play for Ireland, you should be perfectly legitimately able to do that, or your children and grandchildren. And it's the same for everyone when they're abroad. So the Josh Cullens are very proud to play for Ireland, coming through the system, and playing for Ireland from a young age and really coming through, and Callum Robinson and other players of that ilk. And I'm sure Mikey, his family are from Derry, so he look forward to linking up.
Quite a few news stories over the last few weeks. John O'Shea has come in as one of your coaches. There was a lot of rumours that maybe Anthony Barry was going to come back. Can you talk us through the process over the last few months as to...
No, listen, I think the thing about it is that John O'Shea, when I was under 21 manager, I spent 4 days at Reading. I didn't actually move in with him for 4 days, but I stayed in the hotel at Reading, and he picked me up. We went, I went to train. I shadowed Mark Bowen, Eddie Niedzweski and himself for 4 days, and we watched, we trained together, done the clips. I was in all the meetings, and I was and then on the back of that, then I recommended to Jim Crawford that you can consider him as an assistant, because Jim hadn't known John, but Jim ultimately makes his decisions. But Jim met John, and they were happy to work together, and they worked brilliantly together with Alan Reynolds. And so John was in that period. I think obviously he had an incredible career, 118 caps, great career at Manchester United and Sunderland and so forth. And he great humility John has, I think there's no question about that. I think in the meantime he'd done his pro licence and had done another course in UEFA, and obviously I would have met him on the pro licence a bit, because I presented a couple of things on the pro licence, and would have met him and stayed in contact. So for him it was just making sure that he was ready himself, and I wanted somebody who would fit seamlessly into the group, because when John Eustace left, we took our time and said, right, we don't need to a replacement now. Let's take our time, and let's not make a quick appointment, and let's consider what we need in the team. And John gets on brilliantly with Keith Andrews, Dean Kiley, who's their former teammate, in the squad with both of those, and obviously he's been. It can be a disadvantage at times, I suppose, being an ex-teammate of some senior players, but they have such great respect for John that it isn't an issue. And with some of the younger players he's coached in the under-21s, he's had a campaign with Jim Crawford and with the under-21s on part of the previous campaign. So he's come on, and so ultimately, okay, decision was only made recently, but he had to be sure that that's what he wanted to do. From my point, I had to be sure that that's what he wanted to do. I did. For him, was his next stage in his career to be a manager, or was it to come and coach with the Irish team? And he left me in no doubt that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to progress with the Irish team, and this is where he sees his future.
How excited are you about Evan Ferguson's progress?
Yeah, like it's interesting because I do feel that the international team has helped elevate the status of a lot of players. You know, like I'm presuming Nathan Collins had the exposure to that early. Jason Knight, you know, Jason Lumby, all of those players really helped elevate them, you know, and some of the strikers as well. But not the case with Evan, because Evan missed out on. He's younger, obviously. Incredible, 2004 birthday, like. So he missed out on the international teams under 18 and 19 because of COVID. So he wasn't able to play for Ireland, and he's really done this. He played a few games for the under-21s last year, but I remember speaking to Tom Mahon and saying, "What about Evan? How at various times under 19?" He said, "Stephen, I never had him because of COVID. You know, you never actually got the pleasure of really being with him. Very very rarely, you know." And so he's gone to the old traditional route, if you like, come through Bohemians into Brighton. He was in our last camp. He come on two cameo appearances against Norway and Malta, and then the talk was at Brighton that he was going out on loan, and all of a sudden he got his opportunity, and he's already played Liverpool twice and beat Liverpool twice, and played a lot of games, and he's had a remarkable start really to his career, and done very well.
Because you can claim to be something of a Nostradamus with this, because I think when he made those couple of appearances back in November, you made some comments of, you know, people were questioning he wasn't playing for Brighton at the time. Why is he getting the international call up? And you had a feeling that by the time these games would come around, that he would be in a position to have played enough football. You didn't think it was going to be with Brighton, though?
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. But so far in the early stages of his career, he's made everything look quite easy. You know, he keeps things simple. He protects the ball really well. He shields the ball well. He takes the ball in. Makes simple decisions, good decisions in possession, and
it's hard to
he's mobile.
Remember that he's only 18.
He's mobile, and his movement in the box is very good. His natural striker's instincts, and of course he scores headed finishes, which fewer strikers nowadays are scoring headed goals. We've seen that in the under-21s against Israel in the first playoff. Brilliant headed goal, and he has the ability to score headed goals, which is great off crosses to be able to do that.
I was watching him in the Liverpool game where he got injured. I think you might have been over at that game as well, where thankfully he didn't pick up as serious an injury as we all feared. Like, again, that thing that he's only 18 and he's playing up against that quality of opposition. And if you were to ask someone to pick out the 18-year-old on the pitch, you never would have picked him. Like, he's so big, he's so strong, he's so physical. Like, are we looking at we all say the next Robbie Keane? Like, how excited should we all be?
Like, we couldn't have envisaged him having such a dramatic introduction. You know, it's such a dramatic introduction. So, listen, we couldn't have, in the last camp, we couldn't have envisaged Nathan Collins losing his place. So he's been brilliant. He's played so well for Wolves, and he's lost his place. So it can change so quickly, and so we'll have to wait and reserve judgment still. He's done well in a short period of time. He needs to stay injury free, and he needs to keep working hard. He's a very humble lad, and he's determined to do well. Great family and great family support, and he's determined to do well. So hopefully he can continue to do well.
You're not going to tell me if he's going to start against France, but I assume the fact that he's able to play in those sort of games in the Premier League and the FA Cup means that any concerns you would have had back in November about ability, those have been answered. Yeah,
no, he has shown maturity beyond his years, and an understanding of the game, and shown terrific attributes and a good temperament. So he'll be an addition to the squad for sure.
It's a big year for you now. You're 30 games in, which I think usually if it was a player we'd say established international at this stage, established international manager. There was a feeling pre-draw that it was qualification or bust, essentially. That conversation has sort of changed. Have you spoken to people in the FAI about what's an acceptable campaign?
No. I mean, it's our ambition to qualify. You know, we've built this team for the last 2 years, and I think we want to get to Germany. That's been unbelievable. Without doubt, that's been the focus and the determination to do that. That's our ambition. We've been given an unbelievable group now that we weren't expecting, in terms of France and Holland in the same group, and Greece are very strong, and Gibraltar. But regardless, that's the that's the draw. You can't complain about that. You have to accept it, and you have to go and try and have extraordinary nights and extraordinary results. And we've shown our ability to go against the top teams like Portugal, home and away, and match them really. And we can take confidence from that when we play the top teams.
How would you compare yourself now, 30 games into when you got the job? What's the big change?
I think the first 8 or 10 games were obviously very COVID influenced at the time, and we weren't successful for sure, but as I said, I don't like throwing statistics because you can throw other ones back, and but you can see now in that period, I think we've won out half our games in the last 14 games. We've won 7. I think it's since we got our first one, we've won 8, lost 5, and drawn 6 or something like that. So we've beat Scotland 3-0. We've pushed them all the way in Hampden. Contentious penalty decided in the end. We've 2 tough games with Portugal, home and away. We've been able to go up against Serbia. So the Ukraine away. So we've shown the capacity to be able to do that with the team playing out the way we are. So we just need to get better. We're looking at ways how we can improve, constantly improve. We need to improve again in all aspects of our preparation. Now we're looking to improve. And I think the big thing for us last year, one of the big learnings for us, I don't even like the word learnings, but one of the big things.
You're a proper manager now.
I can't believe I used it. But one of the big things we learned last year was the 6-week gap between the championship and the game against Armenia. At the end of the championship, it was that was our weakest performance against Armenia away, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think that 6-week gap, we gave players the monitors, all the stats support equipment. Damien Doyle, our fitness coach, he measured all their runs every day. We had all that kind of stuff. You're out with the window. It is difficult, the transfer window, or the international windows. But obviously, we've completely different preparation between that 6-week break now between the end of the championship and the Greece game, because all the players playing the championship now, bar 1 or 2. And I think.
Does that feed into your thinking for this France game, where you mentioned Nathan Collins? Unless things changed, it'll probably be 6 weeks since he will have had a game. Matt Doherty might get some game time this weekend, but again, it could be 6 to 8 weeks before he's played. There's quite a few players again, as always seems to be the way.
So what we're doing after the March window, we're having 4 days in 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks of the championship, we 4 days in England, 4 days training, right? So 4 nights in England, so an intensive training camp for the players from the championship. Also, then we booked a training camp in Turkey to prepare for the Greece game. So we've 9 days in Turkey ahead of the Greek game. We've 2, and then we travel and we've 2 days in Greece. We go to Antalya for 9 days in preparation. The heat and humidity in Greece, obviously, we didn't want the Greek game in June. When the fixtures were made, there's a day before when the team draws made, there's a day before the fixtures. I said, just don't get me Greece in June, but we got Greece in June. But I think the computer decides these things.
So they tell you.
They apparently, but it is what it is. So we've got to prepare to the best of our ability, and obviously it's we've got to go to Turkey, prepare there, heat, humidity, make sure we're ready for that game, and then we play Gibraltar 3 days later. But I think so. That's massive for us this year. There's only 8 games. Only 8 games between March and November. It'll be decided whether we're going to the Euros or not, or whether we're in the playoff, or none of the above. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's a great incentive for us over 8 games. That short period, we have to produce, just maximise the talent that we have, and try and have extraordinary results against top teams. France and Holland are really top international teams, and Greece are a really emerging team, have done well. So we're going to have to produce. We're going to have to produce really strong performances, but we are capable of that.
Every international is a referendum on the manager. It has always been the way. It's the biggest gig in the country. For people who have doubts, who question, who look at the last couple of years and feel that, even the good performances, the momentum has never really come, what do you say to those people who have doubts when they look at those 8 games as to how you should be judged as Ireland manager?
No, listen, I'm not trying to convince anyone. I think from my point of view, people see, obviously all the games are sellouts, right? So people are saying, right, we see what you've done. You've given competitive debuts to Queeveen, to Gavin, to Mark Travers, to Andrew Bamadelli, Nathan Collins, Darrell O'Shea, Jason Malumbi, Josh Cullen, Jamie McGrath, Chidozie Ogbenya.
I think there's a real recognition
Jason
of that
Knight,
amongst Irish football fans.
And the 5 forwards, right?
But there's a frustration. The Armenia game is the one that stands out, again, of that bit of just struggling to get that extra step of momentum, where people thought in that game, well, this is a match against lower ranked opposition where we will show what Ireland are about, and then
which
there's a setback. The second one at home, which you win, where you're 2-0 up, and you almost end up blowing it.
I know. Listen, it
felt like there was a different atmosphere at the end
that was a tough game. Like it wasn't one we celebrated. Like we won 3-2, and it wasn't euphoric. That's for sure. At the end of that game, I think we're all in agreement there. I think, but nevertheless, it was important. Like Armenia had won a group. Like for example, when Ireland played Georgia in the previous campaign, they drew over the years had Georgia 0-0 and 1-0 in the previous campaign, 0-0 and 1-0. But Armenia won the group with Georgia in it, so they're not. They've improved, but in that game they didn't look like doing anything, and we were well in control and well. So it was a shock to us in that game, and that can't happen again. I think we obviously learned things in that game, and our dynamic sort of holding midfielders at that stage, Josh Cullen, Jason Malumbi weren't on the pitch, but I think, and our attacking, we were a little bit indisciplined from our back three. We were looking to get forward and get a third goal, which and I have to take responsibility as that as manager. You know what I mean? I look at myself with that regard.
Do you accept that when people look at a performance like that stuff has got to stop now?
Well, I think that. No, I don't. I think we were in control for large parts of that without being. They were a low block. They were difficult to break down. We were 2-0 up. And we were comfortable, and we conceded 2 quick fire goals. But we got the winner, and that was important. And we won a tight game, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to continue to win the tight games, because we didn't previously in the Scottish game. We lost to a controversial penalty, and we benefited from that with a penalty in the home game, and we got the winner.
How excited are you for France?
Yeah, no, I am. It's that's a great game. I think it's great history between France and Ireland. Obviously,
not that great.
Well, John Giles, who you have a great relationship with, obviously he had a famous win as a manager against France, and as a player manager against France, and certainly, obviously John O'Shea and Keith Andrews, of course, were playing in the more famous. Are
you going to play that game the night before for the players and say this is all still about revenge for these 2 guys? Is that John O'Shea's first team speech? Do it for me.
So I think that's well documented, and so for us, it's tactically we've got to think about the game. But there'd be no doubt the players would be motivated, the support would be tremendous, and we just got to make sure that we perform without fear on that day, because that'll be obviously possibly the best team in the world coming here, and some really brilliant international players, and we'll have to be at our best to get a result.